Hi, my name is Lindsay Baker, and this is my final project, Student Learning Styles and the Impact It Has on Their Learning. Through the Common Core standards, the effect that it's had on the education of students, it's definitely increased the rigor in the classroom. Students are being asked to extend thinking and improve problem solving. They have to reach these levels of complexity and higher order thinking skills, and as teachers, we need to give them as many resources as they can possibly use to reach that depth. And introducing students to computer programming or coding through different learning styles was the route that I took. The purpose of the research is to see if students are more open-minded about the ways of their learning when being taught a lesson. The study was conducted in 2 of my 3rd grade classrooms. Groups were determined by class periods. Class periods were sorted by academic ability level. So the one class consisted of a middle average or middle ability group, and the other class consisted of a high academic group. Again, with the implementation of Common Core, there's been a huge overhaul of increased rigor within the classroom. Students are being asked to reach these greater depths of knowledge. Teachers need to know their students, so doing things like inventories at the beginning of the year. How does a student typically respond to this type of learning compared to this type of learning? Making small group instruction, individualized learning where they can go at their own pace, and basically just finding learning activities that make them reach those higher order thinking skills. The purpose of my research was to compile activities by visual, auditory, and tactile learning through my coding workbook, engaging students in higher order thinking skills with an emphasis in education on individualized instruction. I also wanted to connect this to the ISTE student standards. My school is very lucky with the implementation of one-to-one devices from grades 3 through 6. We have classes such as typing, and also just a technology class once a week where students are able to get more familiar with things on the devices that they have and feel more comfortable using them. And I also wanted to make the learning fun, engaging, and at a more personal level, or something that they could take with them when they get older. The importance of this study was to find individualized, tailored instruction. The expected learning skill that was needed in this study was coding, and how the learning styles can compare to activities. They have to be able to retain the material, which one of these learning styles allowed them to do this most successfully. And just making sure that the teacher was accommodating student learning styles. So when I get further on in my video, in my PowerPoint, I guess, I'll say how students were paired in certain groups, and at sometimes they could decide who wanted to be the lead in their group or who wanted to be the person showing and doing everything. The benefits of my study: it allowed students to identify their preferred learning style and cater to those needs. Working in the coding workbook helps students collaborate with others that they may not necessarily usually work with. They accomplish new tasks and new skills. Many students were not familiar with coding, so it was nice to give them something brand new that they could learn and they could carry on into the next year. And many felt comfortable with coding because it was similar to a game-like atmosphere such as Minecraft or Roblox. And the idea of coding was for students basically to build little blocks so that a character could do something in a game. And most of the games consisted of catching stars and earning points, or following a maze, and just building simple games but on the computer so that they could learn how to play it and understand what the computer was doing. And I was also lucky enough to be able to incorporate reading and language arts skills into technology format. We had things called if-then blocks, and that was the same as a cause and effect. Students had to follow directions from their partners, and then they also had to understand sequencing. They had to make sure that blocks were in a specific order, otherwise it may not work. The technology that was used in my study was called Scratch website, and it's on the screen here. As you can see, the students used Chromebook laptops. They were in pairs and they shared one device among the two. The coding workbook was called DK Coding Games and Scratch Workbook, and this was actually found through my Scholastic book order, so this was a really good addition to my classroom that I hope to use continually year after year. And the basic of this coding workbook, it showed what makes a game, what is an important component of a game, and what makes it fun, what makes it difficult, what makes it easy, and just showing them that there are certain elements to a game that they need to consider. And then there were 4 games that they needed to make, and each one gradually increased with difficulty. My research question: can students' identified learning styles be impacted by exposing students to a variety of teaching techniques that introduce them to all learning styles? The actual research was done through a learning style quiz, which I found on educationplanner.org. The reports gave a breakdown of the auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learning, and students did a pre and post test with that. The idea was so that teachers could understand students' strengths and weaknesses through compiling these activities and support. If they were more of an auditory learner, they got to do one job, or if they were visual, they were the other. And that played through the rest of their partnership with their classmate. And there would be times when I would say the first person that I call is getting the computer and they are doing the tactile work today. The second person gets the workbook, does the audio and visual learning. But they could play to their strengths and weaknesses. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable using the computer that day because the game could have been getting significantly more complicated, but they felt comfortable relaying the information. So they got to determine which one felt more comfortable in which spot. My research design was a casual comparative relationship study. It was during the 4th quarter of the 2015-2016 school year. I had a pre-test and post-test treatment. Test scores were analyzed to see if students were open-minded about other ways of learning when being taught a lesson. Sample demographics. The study was done 2 times a week for 75 minutes, and that was for the whole reading class. I had 38 students total, 21 girls, 17 boys. Participating in this were students ages mainly 8 and 9, but at the very end of the school year when they were taking their post-test, many of them had had a birthday already and they had turned 10 years old. So most of them, like I said, were 8 and 9 years old, but there were some that were 10 because they had a birthday and they were an older student. They were grouped by ability level. Average had 18 in that class and the high class had 20. Data was collected for the study, again in the 4th quarter. Groups were treated the exact same. They had the same workbooks, they were grouped the same way. I took the highest student from the class with the lowest and just kept pairing them up so that they were all with someone who could really help them out in the study. I will go through each pre-test and post-test graph, and the very first line or the very first bar means that they chose the auditory, which was colored blue. The middle column was a visual response, which is red, and the third column was a tactile response, which was scored as green. Now, I'm not going to read each and every single question and answer choices, but you can pause and stop just to see how they were given. Like I said, they were mainly realistic situations and how they would respond. And it was interesting to see where certain questions gave almost like a complete opposite reaction after doing the coding games compared to how they were at the beginning. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on each one, but I'll try to give you enough time so that you can look over each question. And then at the bottom, I do have the answer choices just so that they're a little bit bigger and easier to see, because I wanted to be able to fit both pre-test, post-test graph on there so that you could compare yourself. My statistical results, and I did a t-test or 2-sample t-test for each type of response. So my auditory, which were the blue bars again, here are the statistical results for that. My visual, or the red bars, the 2-sample t-test for those, the middle column. And then the final column, the tactile responses, which were green. In conclusion, the p-value had a less than 0.0001 when compared to the alpha, which made a significance. And this was an impact that was shown from pre to post test. And that meant that the students, when they were exposed to the teaching techniques, they were able to, when they were exposed to the variety of the teaching techniques that introduced them to all learning styles, it changed the way that they thought, how they really respond to questions. So at the beginning, they may have thought, well, I like seeing pictures, but then once they were set in a realistic situation, it really changed their perspective. And some were more easily seen than others. Some stayed completely the same when you look at the pre and post test results, but many did have a significant jump in certain categories. Some limitations and recommendations. Some students may not have answered truthfully the whole time while they were in my class. Since it was reading class, there was one question with, what do you like to do in your spare time? And the other two choices, I felt like they would have chose more, but one of the answers was read a book or something. So I felt like they may not have truly done that because they thought, well, my reading teacher's going to be looking at this. I'm going to impress her. I want to put reading down so that I please her. So that was one thing, maybe making them take it a couple at a time just so that the whole class wasn't doing it at the same time. Because I did see a lot kind of looking over like, well, what did you pick? Did you pick this one? So it was something new to them, though, too, that they'd never really done a questionnaire like that before. I would have also had students do the study more times throughout the week. It was a short amount of time, but I had to do it because of the air testing in the school year. And in the month of May, it is just chaotic, regardless probably where you are teaching. We had a lot of schedule changes and field trips, and mainly the schedule change really hit us hard, where we could only really do it 2 times a week, and that's how I planned it out. But it would be a lot easier, and I think the information would stick with them if they did it more. And then also working on the first game together would probably be a little easier on the students rather than doing it with their partner right away. Many of them wanted to do it all on their own at the very beginning, did not want any help from me. But as they started getting further in the game, they realized that, one, they had to read a lot, and 2, they did rely on my help, even though I had shown them some of the beginning steps that they had to do. But as the game got on, many of them, it just was very easy for them to finish their game and go to the next one and be successful in that. And then the rest of these are my references. And overall, I really felt that the coding practice will will help them later on in life and they learn a new skill from this. So thanks for listening.